Hello and welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman. Today I'm going to be using some strips from my stash. In fact, I'm using 2.5-inch wide width of fabric strips from my scrap stash and the Half-Hexie Template. I'm going to be using these together to make a beautiful scrappy quilt, kind of a unique design. So I can't wait to show that to you. I also want to let you know that the quilt behind me is a free Valentine's pattern that I have available. Since tomorrow is Valentine's Day, you might want to grab that pattern. It's out on my website. I'll have a link below so you can go out to my website, quiltingwithlori.com, and grab that free PDF pattern. There, it'll show you how to put the blocks together. Plus, I do have YouTube video tutorials that teach you these blocks, the applique block in the center as well as the bachelor block all the way around. And it shows you how to put the quilt together. So don't forget to grab those video links as well as the free pattern. Also, I have a pillow here. And I have a video tutorial that teaches you how to use your strips of fabric from your scrap stash and make this fun pillow for Valentine's Day. So now I'm going to take you to my tabletop and show you how I'm going to use my Scrappy strips from my 2.5-inch strip bin, this Half-Hexie Template, and make a wonderful little quilt. I also wanted to let you know, for those of you who are not familiar with my Speedy solutions to cut and sort, organize your scrap stash, I do have a book that walks you through that. I also have a video tutorial linked below so you can just see exactly how I cut, sort, and organize my scrap stash so that I can make beautiful quilts using them. I also have a corresponding patterns book, and there are 12 scrappy patterns in here, 5 scrappy patterns in here, plus the techniques. So with the two of them, you get everything that you need to be able to get your scrap stash cut, sorted, organized, stored, and ready to use to make beautiful quilts. So I've gone into my 2.5-inch strip bin because it matches up to this Half-Hexie width. You could absolutely use any width of fabric strip that you have in your stash, depending on what size Half-Hexie you decide to use. Here is one that would use a 4.5-inch wide strip. But what I have is a whole lot of my 2.5-inch strips, so I want to use those to make a quilt. Now, I'm not making very large quilts anymore. I have so many large quilts, so I want to make wall quilts that I can use in my home. In fact, there is a spot in my kitchen where I do have some smaller wall quilts hanging. And so I'm going to make this one so that it finishes at 26 inches. It's going to have some borders, etc. But isn't this a fun pattern? It's got a stripe, a curvy stripe, if you will, and that is made with the lights and the darks and the mediums. So I've just pulled mediums and darks, and I've also pulled some light fabric from my with the fabric strips, and I have simply taken each of these and cut the Half-Hexies from them. And let me put this on this side here. Every time, if you fold them, you can actually get 2 Half-Hexies at one time, or if you're confident in your cutting, you can stack 4, maybe even 6 if you're confident in that, and then just go ahead and cut them out. I cut a bunch of these already, and it also allows you to remove the little notches on the end there. So I went ahead and cut a whole bunch of darks. I have a bunch of whites here, or lights, and a bunch of mediums. And so that, and all of this can be thrown either in your pet pillow for stuffing, or you can use it in your crumb quilts if you choose to do that. So here is the quilt. Now I want to share with you how you get started in laying this out. I have already sewn 5 of these rows together. I have left the ends loose, and I'll share with you why here in a minute. But to get started on this, what you're wanting to do is to create this beautiful stripe or this curve with the lights and also with the darker fabrics. And so in each of my rows, I'm doing a light, and I'm just maintaining the white on white print for all of my lights. And I've got a medium, light, dark, light, medium, light, and so forth, and that's what I'm doing all the way across. You can put yours together in any way that you choose to. The first thing that you'll want to do, and I flipped this around so that it's on the right side for you, this would be your left area here, and as you're placing your first Half-Hexie over on this side, the first thing you want to do is literally fold that Half-Hexie in half and create a nice crease right down the center of it. Because every one of these Half-Hexies, you want to line up that crease as you're sewing the rows together. That's how you get this beautiful, even curve that you see. So what I've done for every one of these hexes on this side. I've creased it first with a nice crisp crease so that I can easily see it. And then when I stitched my rows together, I made sure that I matched up those creases, and then I started sewing. And I did leave these open because I wasn't sure if I was going to add a few more blocks on, or hexes on each end. I've decided I don't need to. I did measure this, and I don't want it any wider. So this is as wide as I'm going to go with it. But I do need to create some more rows. So what we want to start with over here, I'm going to start with a medium, and I have already creased it in half. So you're basically just taking the hexie in half and creasing it. Nice crisp crease there so that you can easily see that crease down the center. And it is going to go right there, and it's going to line up. Whoops, I'm on the wrong side. For me, this is the left side. For you, this is the left side, so I had to flip over here. So this is where I'm going to start on this side. I'm going to make sure that those creases line up. And that's how I will start laying all of these hexes out. So I'm going to do white next. I've done a medium, light, and now I want to do a dark. So I'll grab this green one right here. I need another light. And you can do the values any way you want. Maybe you're going to do yours in a 2-color so that it's just 2 colors, you know, lights and a darks, anything you want to do. This is your quilt. You have fun with it and make it any way that you want. All right, I've laid them out. The seam allowances are taken up in this row here, so I had to overlap everything so that it actually ended up being positioned properly, because every one of these lights, darks, and mediums are going to be in the center of the one above it, as you can tell. And when I actually sew this row together, then all of the seam allowances will be there, and it will fit this row beautifully. And then I will be able to line up this crease here with this crease here as I sew those last 2 rows together, and it will match up beautifully. Right now, I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and when you sew these together, you are simply going to butt up. You see if I can show you that. This corner goes with that corner right there, and there's a tiny little dog ear right there, and then this corner right there goes with that corner, and there will be a tiny little white dog ear hanging over. And then you're going to stitch 1/4 inch from there to there. So it's from point to point. That's how you're going to stitch it. So I'm going to take it to the machine, stitch it, and I'll bring it back and show you how that goes together. All right, I brought this closer so hopefully you can see this. As you can see, I've taken those 2 hexes and lined up the side edge. So they're going at an angle here when you lay them right sides together, and that's perfect. And then, of course, this little dark tip you see from the bottom, and then the white tip is hanging over that edge. I sewed from quarter to corner there, or from tip to tip. And when you open it, then it's in a straight row. And when I'm pressing mine, I am simply pressing mine open. You don't have to. You can press all of yours to the dark and then simply nest your seams. Actually, you won't be nesting any seams because the seams are going to be staggered across the rows, so there will not be any nesting of seams. But I am simply pressing mine open so that the lights will be showing under the lights, and the darks will not be showing under the lights. They'll be under the dark itself. So that's how I got started over here. So that one is ready to go. Now I'm going to continue working my way across this row, sewing those together just like that. And if you'll want to see how I'm going to put this together, so here are the 2 hexes, and I'm simply going to flip them right sides together, and I'm lining up this little corner with that corner, and then I'm lining up this bottom corner with the corner on the bottom hexie. There we go. And then we have a little dog ears that are showing on both sides, which is perfect. And then we will stitch 1/4 inch, and it's going to work out beautifully. So that's simply how you stitch the hexes. Very easy. I'm going to go ahead and continue doing this across the row, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to match up the rows to create this unique design. I've sewn this row together. I first finger pressed everything, and then I took it to the iron and I pressed it open. I like to press my seam allowances open. You don't have to. You can simply nest yours if you like. Press them to the dark side. I do use a shorter stitch length when I press my seam allowances open, so keep that in mind. Here is what I have right now, and I made sure to crease that first hexie, and you only have to worry about it on the first hexie on the left-hand side. I've got that crease. I'm going to match it up to this crease, and then I'm simply going to flip it and stitch it. I'll match that up, take it to my machine, and then just continue coming down. This is all on the straight of grain, so there shouldn't be any stretching, but just be very careful as you're stitching. I'm going to start here at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and stitch all the way down. I'll probably end before I get to the end there. And then after, I think I'm going to make at least 4 or 5 more rows to make this more of a square. Then I'm simply going to square up this area here. I'll use my ruler and identify what size I want it to be, and I'll square it up. And then if I have to finish sewing any of these seam allowances, I'll do that at that time. As you remember, I have all of these still open. They're not completely sewn because I was concerned that maybe I had to add some more. But my width is fine. I just need to have it longer, taller. So I'm going to continue working on these. The first thing I'm going to do is get this sewn on here. I'll bring it back and show it to you after I've stitched it. But again, I'm lining up this crease here, and then I'm simply going to place it all the way down and sew 1/4 of an inch. All right, I have stitched it. I matched up those creases, stitched 1/4 of an inch. I made sure that all my seam allowances were pressed open. You could certainly press your rows to one side all the way. I am actually pressing mine all open. So I'm going to take this to the iron and get it pressed. And then I'm going to continue adding more rows. So I guess we need to start over on this side. To me, this is my left, and so I keep starting over there. But we'll want to fold this first one and make sure I've got a nice crease in it. And then we'll continue adding. I'm going to do a lighter one here. Here is the white. Now we'll grab one of these. Here is the white. Let's grab one of these. And once the seam allowances are in here, these will line up better. Each of these is going to be staggered and centered over the hexie below it, or in your case, as you're looking at it, it's going to be above it. So I'm going to go ahead and get all of those stitched together, sew that row on, and just keep going. I think I need to do at least 3 more rows after this. What I've done so far is squared up my quilt. I added more rows, as you can see, and then I squared it up to 20.5 inches wide, and it's 20.5 inches long, so it's a square quilt. Then I added a 1.5 inch width of fabric strip on each side, so they're 1.5 inches. The first one was 20.5 inches long, and then the next, of course, was longer as I added that. So now I have a white border all the way around, and the next thing I'm going to do is add pale yellow. This goes very well with my kitchen, so it's just going to be a very soft border all the way around. This is a 2.5 inch wide with the fabric strip, and it's going to go around the outer edge. And then I'd like to get this up on my Longarm quilter so that I can show you how I'm going to quilt this. I'm going to use ruler work on the center. It's a really simple way to quilt this. You can do this both on your domestic sewing machine or on your Longarm. I prefer to use my Longarm, so I'll take it up there with a ruler and do that. And I'll probably do some feather quilting around the outer border, and I'll show that to you as well. One thing I was going to mention when I was putting on my borders, I always audition fabrics from my border. I go shopping in my stash, and so I just found this soft buttery yellow that works. And I first outlined the center of the quilt with a white strip, and now I'm ready to start quilting. What I'm going to do is basically do a stitch in the ditch all the way around the inside or the center here of this quilt. And then I'm going to do a feather quilt. Part of my feather is going to be a smaller feather on the white part of the strip. And then the other side of my feather is going to be a fatter feather, which will be on the yellow part of my strip. So the first thing I'm going to do is a stitch right in the ditch around the very center of this quilt to secure it on the frame. Because I don't have anyone to film this, I'm doing this all by myself. When I'm over on this side, I can't, it's more difficult for me to film this because I get in the way of the camera, either my body or this handle. But what I've done, I'm starting my base here for my feather. And so I've started here, on this seam line, and I've just come in and made a little base line here, and I'm going to end up over on this side, and that's where I'm going to actually start my feather. But you always have to have this base, or you should anyway. There are feathers that you can make where you don't have to have that baseline, but that just helps guide you as you're working through the feather. So I'm going to continue. Hopefully you can see some of this. Okay, so I've got my baseline all the way around for my feather. Now I'm going to start quilting over here. I'm going to bring you over. Hopefully you can see this then as I get started. And you'll notice on that first one, I just came part way back, and I will finish that feather when I come around. You always want to tuck in at a 45-degree angle. Now, when you get to a corner like this, you'll notice how I might need to bring you real close. Let me reset this so you can see this close up. I just reviewed that clip and saw that my arm was in the way. So here's what I did. I started right here and came and stopped. I did not finish this feather. That will be finished when I come back at the bottom and come toward the top. So I just went halfway in, and then I just continued doing my feathers. You tuck in at a 45-degree angle all the time. And then up here, if you can see, I've gone ahead and tucked in my feathers there, and now my feathers are going to start walking this direction. And hopefully you can see that. So now I'm going to come around and tuck in that feather again, trying to stay at a 45. Let me move my scissors before I run over that. And I'm only doing one side of the feather. There are people, and I have in the past done more, and I have done both sides at one time and can certainly do that. So hopefully you can see how I'm coming along here. It's kind of in the dark. Let me keep going, and hopefully you'll see it then in the light. I'm going to keep going and finish this side. Trying to keep all of my feathers fairly even. They're not completely even. There's some that I'm not really happy with, but I'm not going to get too old. It's just doing the best that I can. And again, I'm tucking these in like this. All right, so I finished the inside. I'm starting on the outside now. I'm going to continue doing the feather around the outside. I think I'll be able to move the camera, and when I get to this portion up here, hopefully I'll be able to position it better so you can see it better than right now. But starting out the same, so I'm not completing that first feather. And I'm making sure to leave at least a 1/4 of an inch, if not more, on the outside edge, because that's where the binding will be. I don't want to cut off my feathers when I attach my binding. And then on the outside, I'm walking around the corner the same as I did before. Now I'm slanting my my feathers this direction. I'm going to come around the corner here, and then I'll show you close-ups of what I've done. Well, let's see if you can kind of see that. Since it's pretty difficult for me to get this positioned properly so that you can see what I'm doing, I'm just showing you a close-up here. So I started down here. I've got my stem or the baseline already done. I started here and went back. And you'll see there's, they're not all completely even. Didn't backtrack exactly on all of these, but I'm happy with it. It's just fine. I'm not going to get, if this was a quilt that I was going to have judged, I would be much more particular about it. But that's how I've done the inside, and I go back to the baseline all the time, and I always make sure that I go back at a 45-degree angle. And so this is what I've done all the way around, and then I finished there. Then I came back over here, and I started at the base again, came around, stopped there, came back. And again, both of these will be finished when I come up around and finish the feathers from the bottom up. So I've just gone ahead and done these. And when I came up to the corner, you kind of have to start turning your feathers so that they're turned in the other direction. And I'm going to continue doing that all the way around. And I'll show you this when I'm done. Now I'm starting on the center, and I'm going to finish this part, and then I'm going to bring my quilt up and continue working. But I'm going to do an outline stitch, a 1/4 of an inch outline stitch around each of these, and I think I'll also do it in the center. So I'm going to use a ruler. The ruler that I'm working with, and there's so many rulers you could work with. This one happens to be the Sway 3 by Natalie Bonner, Piece and Quilt. So you can get this at pieceandquilt.com if you're interested in that. And it's just got a lot of nice curves to it, some short areas there, and a nice long area here, and that's what I'm using. So instead of stitching in the ditch, I'm actually doing a 1/4 of an inch outline stitch. And I'm going to do that in both the outside and the inside. And I'm traveling on the seam allowance around the outer edge of the quilt. Whoops. So what I have done, and I ran into the camera, I apologize, but I came around on the white part, 1/4 of an inch all the way around. Then I traveled over and I came around a 1/4 of an inch on the colored part, traveled on the seam allowance, 1/4 of an inch on the colored part of the hexie. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm going to travel on the seam allowance. There are quite a few stitches on that seam allowance. So that's something just to be aware of if you're going to use this method. I just don't want to break my thread and constantly keep changing my thread. So what I have done there is an outline stitch on both the light and the dark all the way around here. And I'm going to continue doing that across the row. So as you can see, I can continue going down the quilt without having to cut threads at all. So it's a wonderful way to go ahead and get this stitched. Very simple, straight stitching. You could do this on your domestic machine. You don't have to put this up on a long arm. It's just the way I prefer to quilt. So, and you could certainly just use your, on your domestic machine, you could put on your walking foot, and you could certainly do all of the straight stitching and use parts of your walking foot to measure to make sure that you're staying either 1/4 of an inch or however far away from the edge that you'd like to be. So that's what I'm going to do for the center. I'm going to continue working my way down, and I'll advance the quilt and continue working on feathering in the center. I should be able to get this done hopefully this evening so that maybe I can get this video out for you tomorrow. I have quilted all across the center section of the quilt. And next what I did was I made my, I started doing my base, the stem of the feather, and then I actually started the stem of the feather up here, came down like this, and at this point then I created the first half hump and then continued going around all the way up until I met this one, and I believe this was where I had stopped. Remember, when I began, I stopped right at that point, and so what I did when I came around here was I made sure I touched that. And that's how I finished that section. Then I'm going to come back over here and again start out here. I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch or to 1/4 of an inch there, and I will just create an unfinished feather right there, and then I'll finish it later. And then I'll continue going around and doing these, and once I get up to this point where you see I've not finished that feather, then I will come up and finish it. I'll make sure that I touch it, which finishes that row of feathers. So I'm going to continue working on this. It's difficult for me to have you see this very well because I'm videoing this myself. I don't have anyone to video it, but I'm just kind of giving you a quick overview of what I've done. I'm going to finish this up, and I'll take it back to the my tabletop, and then I'll get it squared up so you can see what it looks like. I've finished quilting the quilt, and I've taken it off the long arm, and I've squared it up. And the next thing I'll need to do is cut my binding and get some binding on this quilt. But this will give you an idea of what I have done here. I've done the feather quilting all the way around the outside edge. And for the inside, I've simply done a straight stitch using a ruler. If you do this on the domestic sewing machine, then you can just use a walking foot and just find a spot on your walking foot that gives you that 1/4 of an inch mark. And you just keep going back. When you get over to this side, then I just traveled up there and continued all the way around, went up a 1/4 of an inch, continued all the way around. So I've stitched on both sides of these seams. I didn't actually stitch in the seam on all of this, but it is finished. I love it. I can't wait to get the binding on and get a sleeve on and get it labeled and get it hung in my kitchen. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel today and checking out this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you do like the content that I provide, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Share my videos with your friends, family, and your quilt guilds. I really appreciate that and love to hear comments. So if you could leave a comment below, let me know if you plan to use your scrap stash to make this beautiful Hexie quilt. And until next time, happy quilting.